Hi, everybody. It's Nancy with For Your Canine.
And Joanne with For Better, For Worse.
And Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
Thank you for tuning in tonight. Today, we're going to be talking about positive dog training versus permissive. Um, and actually, Joanne was the one that was pretty adamant about, about this particular topic. I have crate training. Joanne has permissive training. So we're going to kind of discuss a little bit about what that is, what the difference is, because I think, and I 100% agree with Joanne. I think people get very confused as to what positive training means and what it is, and they kind of spill over into being a little permissive with their dogs. Uh, so not that you have to be have super disciplined regimented training ways, but sometimes we can how can we say, just like, oh, it's excuse things that maybe should be taken care of or trained or whatever. Um so that's one of the things we wanted to kind of chat about, because we're all positive dog trainers for sure, but a lot of some of our clientele, and I see it all the time, is they think it's that allowing dogs to do whatever and having the freedom, but you also see that in children a lot too. So so that's a uh I think it's a general cultural problem that we're having these days anyway. So Joanne, could you kind of go into why you decided that this was definitely a topic we had to discuss, which I 100% agree with. So
Sure. So, I mean, I think I'm probably the most lax of the three of us.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
But I'm seeing more and more of it lately, which is sort of like, I'll use the example of a dog being friendly, right? The dog gets out of the car, sees its friend, person, other dog, whatever, starts to pull, and then the owner is, sort of being drugged behind the dog to get to that thing, right? And so the people are like, just kind of excuse that because, well, yeah, but that's his favorite person, or he loves that dog, or fill in the blank of whatever that is, right? And the dog does not understand it's that combo. The dog goes, oh, I just pull and drag you to get to the things that I want to get to. And I don't think people understand just how much you're creating a habit in the dog to think it's okay to do that, right? That's they do it more and more, the more chances that they get to practice that behavior. And I've just seen cases lately where it's becoming a little dangerous for the human and for other people involved in that interaction, right? Maybe the dog sees somebody that they don't see coming, or the dog gets tangled up on the way to do it because the dog only has one thing on its mind. So I just wanted to take some time tonight and really kind of talk about, what do you guys do and how to kind of prevent that and give the dog some skills so that they understand, I know that's your favorite person in the world, but you don't get to drag me anywhere. Okay. And trust me, I'm the first one who has dogs who want to drag them around. So, I really have to be careful about it. It's a thing that I deal with myself. So.
right. Yes, and I would agree. I think too, along those same lines, is that people don't want dogs to have any negative experience. You don't want to have them have any bad things, and I hate to say bad things, but they don't want them to encounter any negative things, or everything has to be happiness and joy. And it's not that having your dog under control is negative, but for some people it is. It's not fair that we have the dog not allow the dog to drag them to their favorite buddy or their favorite tree. Well, he really has to go. It's like, I said, but you can't. I mean, it's not okay, because they can get hurt, and some of our population's a little older, and can be a problem. And the dogs, consistency is key. If you let the dog doesn't understand that that's a really great person that isn't going to mind them coming up at them versus another person that absolutely might have a problem with it. So it's one of those things. It's like it's it's just good manners. Like you wouldn't let your child run up to somebody and jump on them and and all that stuff. Well, maybe I don't know. Some people might, but but you wouldn't allow that. So why would you allow your dog to do it, right?
Well, I also think too, like there's a mindset of the dog when you're approaching another dog or another person or what have you. And if you don't want them jumping, right? First of all, they're like, dismissive of you. I pull to the person or whatever dog. Then I say hi. I'm overexcited. What happens if that particular person or individual dog, what have you, is not feeling well? And then happens to be like, hey, get off me. I don't like it right now. And then there's an interaction. And then it becomes, oh, he just wanted to say hi. Oh, yeah, he's not feeling good. And I think part of it, too, is like when other dogs greet other dogs, we get a little offended if the dog is a little sharp. Well, I mean, if I have a bad day, I'm not going to be super like, oh, yeah, good. Squeeze me. I'm good. Give me a great big hug. It's a problem. So I think that, those are things that you have to remember is like there's a mind frame, mindset, and that's happening over and over again as the dogs are allowed to rehearse it. So every time they get to see somebody, they're like, oh, we get to do this. It's not kosher. It's not cool. Like, I don't mind my dogs having friends, but you can't be yanking me over to them. So.
Right. Especially if you're not expecting it, right?
Right. And I'm going to give you an example. I like this one because I think we've all seen it at some point in our life, right? You're in the grocery store or the store line and there's a kid in front of you and they're acting up and they're yelling and screaming or crying and whining or whatever. And I want a candy bar. You're not getting a candy bar right now. No. Right. Yeah. And so we cry louder or we whine louder or we hit things or we do whatever. And then, eventually, fine, here, just stop. Right. And so in the end, you're appeasing the kid with candy to get that behavior to stop, which in that moment, sure, might work for you, right? You don't get to be embarrassed or it quiets the kid down. But like every other time you go to the store, guess what happens, right? So without meaning to, in one moment, you can create really bad things.
Right. Especially, and it doesn't matter that your dog is friendly, right? Because if your dog is friendly and loves dogs and people, that's good, but it can easily change if your friendly dog keeps going up to other dogs, has a bad event, and then now your dog is no longer super friendly because it's not really it had a negative experience with a dog, like it said that maybe wasn't feeling well or doesn't like dogs, and now there's a situation that maybe could have been avoided by having a little bit more control. And it's no different. I mean, if you think about it, do you have somebody just come up to you and grab you and starts playing with you and start, that would be that would be kind of weird. Yeah. So don't let your dog do that to other dogs, because that's rude, right? So
there's a dog. One thing is there's a dog, a family. They have two young pups, and one of them super excited and play with other dogs, and the other dog is a little apprehensive because he has had not good experiences. Plus, he had specific issues going on when he was young, so his socialization was different. When he comes to day school, he is more, he is very interested in everything else going on. He can be interrupted with tactile or touch, but yet he's very hyper aware of what's happening. And if you allow him to sit in that mindset and like just kind of, simmer, what ends up happening is he gets overexcited. So when the actual interaction actually occurs, then it's more explosive. So he's uncertain, not super sociable, whatever. Well, they happen to be walking him, which I tell people, and we've had this discussion, I'm not a big fan of walking my dogs just because I don't trust others. And they ended up walking him at this place, and some gentleman had pulled up in the car. The dog jumped out the door and started running at them. And so for this particular puppy, who is like 5-6 months old, it was very concerning. And so then we talked about what to carry and stuff like that and everything. But it causes problems for that particular individual dog to be run up on, right? Which is, I think people don't understand that just because your dog is friendly, it's not okay. Like, you don't know how that other dog is. And so this poor dog was super hyper vigilant, super reactive, and so forth. And then the other dog was like, hi, what's up? And let's play. And you're very rude coming in on me, laid on his back and rolled over, which is still, by the way, not okay. Right? It's to be so overwhelmed that you fall down and go, oh, just don't kill me. It's not cool. Right?
Right.
So, I think there's a lot of things about that. And unfortunately, in our society, like you said, Nancy, it is very people allow a lot of stuff. I'm like, it's okay. Like, having rules is not going to make you a bad person or a bad owner. It's just going to help give your dog appropriate guidance. So, but unfortunately, in this particular case, we're having to fight against that, right? So in this puppy, we have to work on skills of what to do when this happens. How should mom handle and socially support the dog to be able to help the dog overcome some of the stuff that's going on? So yeah, I mean, it's, but I will tell you the same thing. I mean, I have my Papillon. He's Mr. Friendly. He loves everybody. He's like, hi, how are you? And I'm like, you could get eaten. Like, they could just chomp on you and be done. Like, where's your sense of, like, I don't know, safety and what have you. But so that's going to be my thing to work on with him, because he's pretty sociable. I don't care that you're sociable. You don't get to say hi to everybody. It's not okay. It's not right. And you could be a snack, or you could be, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's still inappropriate. I don't care how small you are. And I think there's also a size difference too, right? Whether it's a big dog or a small dog, like, people are a little more forgiving if it's a little dog approaching your dog, what have you, depending. I mean, I think there's something to say about that. So,
yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Well, and I was going to say, just to expand on this, right? I think a lot of what we see does have to do with people and dogs. But you guys, this is a topic that goes far beyond that, right? So this is also going for walks, right? There's a lot of stuff. Well, and again, I don't go for walks either. But, or, you're taking your dog out to go to the bathroom at a trial or something like that, wherever you're out and about, right? If your dog's like, I want to sniff this, I want to sniff that, I want to do this, I want to do that, right? If you have the time for that and that's on your agenda, fine. But it is totally okay to say, not right now, leave that alone. Or if you are out somewhere and there's something in the street, a McDonald's cheeseburger or a dead bird, leave it. We're not doing that. You're not walking up. I'm not going to let my dog walk up to that. Number one, I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it died from. And, I don't think my dogs would eat that, but I'm not going to give you an opportunity to check that out, right? That's gross. And so there's everyone has their own rules, but I think there's some safety factors in there too, that we're humans. The dogs are dogs. They sometimes do really stupid things, like, eat squeakers and eat poop, and it's gross. And so we have to make adult decisions and make the decisions for them sometimes, even if it's something against what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, and so here's the thing. So I think giving your dog direction and explicit permission to do certain things is really important. Like, for example, if they see a dog they like, that they get along and they're buddies. Because the thing is, if they drag or run over to that other dog, even though they know each other, they could, like Joanne said, they could be having a bad day. And sometimes, even if they like each other, they can have a bad interaction there, right? So you want to make sure you walk up and if they're going to start any interactions, should be calm and relaxed, not off the top, crazy, jumping around, right? Should be all very, very, should be really focused. Same with people. They should walk up and they should have permission. And they should always ask for permission, because some people, it may be okay that day and another day it may not be okay. So making, and it gives clarity to the dog. They understand what you're asking. Like, they understand what's okay and what's not okay. It gives them some clear boundaries of what's what's permissive. And for some dogs, especially dogs that tend to have anxiety issues, it's really, really helpful because they know in this situation, this is going to happen. In this situation, that's going to happen. It's really, really helpful when it's clear, the dogs are clear on what's expected and what the what's gonna happen. It gives them a lot of comfort knowing that it's predictable, like this is gonna happen here, right? Instead of like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen. Hopefully it'll be okay because they're not sure, right?
Yeah. And I'm going to give you an example. So yesterday I had a private lesson with this little pitty mix who was, wow, really, really high energy and really over aroused. We're going to get toys now. And so I literally watched this dog like a skateboarder, like almost like a flyball dog. If you've ever seen dog do flyball, onto the woman's chest, jumped, banked off of her, went flying in the air, and then just ran off. And I was like, so that's a normal thing for you, right? She goes, yeah, when she gets really excited, when she gets really excited, she'll do things like that. So I don't want you to think we're imposing don't do things, right? If that's something that you enjoy, let's say you have a Frisbee dog and that's one of your tricks, or you enjoy that, that's okay. You can still do that behavior, but you need to put it on a cue, right? If you really enjoy your dog jumping into your lap, that's my if you really enjoy your dog jumping into your lap, which my Vizsla loves it, and he comes up in front of me and he's like, can I come up there? And I'm like, yep, come on up. And then boom, he'll jump right in my lap and he comes up, but he waits. Right? Because if they do it to you, it's okay to do. So as long as I don't care if you want them on your shoulders, wear them on your head, right? But just putting the cue on it gives the dog can I? Oh, yes, you said yes. Now I can, right? So it prevents them from just making those really dumb decisions where if you're not used to it, right, you can chip a tooth or bite your tongue or, any of those things. You can get hurt. So that's what we're trying to avoid in some of those situations as well.
Actually, in a lot of those situations. Just saying, I think the majority of those permissive situations become pretty dangerous pretty quick. And that's why it's like, why aren't the people putting the dog under control or whatever? And it's because to be fair, it is dangerous for the dog or for the person or somebody. I cannot tell you how many people I've had come up and the dogs drag them over to go say hi to see somebody. And the handler has fallen and gotten broken nose or all that stuff. So it's one of those things. It becomes a safety issue. And a lot of people think putting those boundaries, having them sit and asking for permission is going to somehow
kill their drive
or kill their sociability, that if you're going to make them do that, they're not going to like people. That's not it at all. Because it just puts the correct skills there. I can do that. I do that to my shepherd. Can't wait. You got to wait to say hi. He still loves people more than anything else in the world. Hasn't changed it in the least bit because it hasn't. So, and I think a lot of people think that they're gonna crush it or it's gonna make the dog unhappy. And in some cases, you might have to make the dog unhappy for a minute. So, and that's part of life, right? That's our life too, right? Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're,
I'd be much happier if I won the lottery, but that's dampening my drive. Right?
That's what keeps you coming to work every day. But that's one of those things, right? It's like it's not going to stop anything. Like they're still going to like people. They're still going to enjoy dogs, even if you put some boundaries around it, right? Because I think I think if we
look at breaking everything down, right? Sociability is one aspect, right? And then there's arousal. And then if we kind of look at what impulse control basically drops down to, right? It's just, what is it? Resilience. And I mean, what would you guys say in terms of persistence, maybe
That
Yeah.
one
biddability,
sucks.
like, right? So
Yes.
right, so all those components, it's not necessarily sociability that you're affecting. All you're doing is giving guidance and guidelines versus, okay, now we're allowing them to rehearse these other behaviors that aren't necessarily the best opportunities. So
And I think what's hard about that is that it's hard because you have to be 100% consistent. You can't be like, okay, today is okay to do that, but tomorrow isn't. The dog doesn't understand that. So, it just gets difficult with how can I put it, how consistent you must be. It's like every day. Otherwise, it doesn't work. The dog
Well,
will.
and even when you've taught it, trust me, when your dog sees some of their favorite people, they still test it, still, right? And so, I still fight that. I have a very, very social dog, and sometimes he will hit the end of the leash, right? And that's the moment where I'm like, hey, come over here. We're not doing that, right? And he's like, but I want to, right? So even though he knows all the rules, they still are like, is this still today? I really want to go there. Like, not right now. I will let you, just not right now. Okay. And sometimes, no, right? Like if somebody
Sure.
had an ankle surgery, right? The dog doesn't know that. So if I let them run up on that person every day and all of a sudden, right, they're in a full leg cast and crutches, the dog runs up and jumps on them, might knock them over.
Oh God. That would be
the other component I think that we also should consider is that sometimes people have had reactive dogs or dogs that don't get along with people or other dogs, and then they get a super sociable dog, so they're so excited, right?
yes.
And I think they get over exuberant. I'm like, that's okay though, but still, you can create another issue. So I think, and I get that part. Like I think we've all had our share of dogs that are super sociable about certain things and reactive on leash and so forth. I mean, I get that, but I do still always adhere to it's important to have a brain when meeting somebody, not like, if I were somebody who you're meeting for the first time, I'm not Miss Huggy, like no touchy. It's a problem for me, right? So for others, I mean, it's fine. Like some people are like, oh, I love to hug everybody, right? So and I think that's yes, that's Nancy, touchy, very touchy. So I think that's something else to consider, right? And I get it. Everybody's in a different place. Oh, I was like, were you going to say something?
No.
I'm
Trying to keep
fending off a sociable dog.
Yes, I'm dealing with over sociability.
Got it. So,
and that's what I mean. You're not gonna take a dog like my shepherd that loves people, and if I put rules on his interaction, is not gonna keep him from loving people. He's always going to love people. That is just who he is. It's part of who he is. We're just putting some structure around how he does it. Because he's 100-pound dog, he cannot run up and go, I love you so much, and run up to that, because it's like, I have to pay lots of hospital bills if he does that. Because you can knock.
And I think it also bleeds into the opposite, right? So even though you have a dog who may not be super sociable with people, over socializing or over allowing them to,
Yes.
not allowing them to like just run up on people or have people handle doesn't necessarily mean that you're creating a sociable dog either. Like accept them for who they
Right.
are. Right?
Right.
And I think there's like different aspects of it that, and I get it. Like, and I know anybody who's had dogs who are like, my dog Charlie wanted to put holes in all the dogs. And I'm like, this is not okay. And, so you appreciate when you do get sociable dogs, but I also think there's a healthy amount of sociability as well, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm okay with, like my border collie super like wants to launch himself and gaze into your eyes and like absorb you into his soul. And I'm like, that's not okay. It's not cool to do that. So, we work a lot about that on that particular piece of it.
Yeah. Well, it's just like Tango and Tenor are the same.
I know.
Brothers from another mother.
Yeah, pretty much. Love me.
Yeah, exactly. Which is nice to have that level of sociability, but some people don't appreciate it.
Right.
Like because Tenor and Tango would be like, I love you. Oh, I love you, man. I love you more.
The love brother fest. Yep, for sure.
Versus, uh, but like allowing them to practice those kind of obnoxious behaviors are not okay. And and this goes back to my little is the barking in a crate. So a lot of people are like, oh, he's so sad. And that's kind of where some of the barking situation comes to be. I know, I love you too, honey. Get off. Um, where that's one of the it's like, well, he doesn't like to be in a crate, or he has to be by me, or whatever it is. It's like, no, it's a life skill he has to learn. They have to get better with that. I appreciate it, but it's not something that it's okay to practice and to do. So you definitely have to really look at it like why it's happening. And then sometimes, yeah, it's going to be hard. Like going to the vet, you don't want them to be sad or upset, but sometimes it's part of life. They have to. And I think it's like, oh, he doesn't want to be in a crate. So they take him out of the crate. And then the dog then learns, oh, all I have to do is do this and I don't have to be in there. Right. Instead of like, okay, we still have to give him the skills and do the training, but he needs to be able to be okay with it. It's a skill he must have, right? Whether he likes it or not. Right. And a lot of people so and I think Joanne and I were talking about this. It's like, okay, so you don't crate the dog and you're going to spend thousands of dollars taking stuff out of his taking stuff out of his stomach, right? And there is a limit to how many times they can do surgery in the tummy, right? And so it's like, so is that better? Is that better than crate training? I don't know, because people seem to think it is. So
I don't know. Maybe somebody's going for the record of how many times is okay.
Yeah. Oh, Tim, I did see that the parent test about the different styles of parenting, and yes, it's all about that. It's and so you can try to have a discussion with a 5-year-old about why it's wrong and blah blah blah, and sometimes just the different styles of that, and and I don't think there's a good and bad. I think it depends on the dog and the human being, right? So.
Yeah, Matt says, loving the conversation, confused why walking dogs is bad. I think dogs need discipline, but I'm very much for walks. Would love more info, especially for us city dwellers. So, Matt, if your neighborhood's safe for you and you haven't had any issues, by all means, walk your dogs. I think all of us as trainers and have seen it ourselves, we've done some Facebook Lives prior about there's a lot of loose dogs and there's a lot of dogs running loose that are not friendly. I think all three of us have heard of deaths from dogs running up and killing dogs and being rushed, and dogs that have anxiety about other dogs. It's just, I think we've just heard all the stories and
has had it happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So we're not against walking. Some people live in a pretty good environment where walks are great, right? You're able to the city, because I live in Chicago. The city has lots of dogs, and unfortunately, and the big problem, Matt, it's not the dog walking, and it's not that, it's people, and this is kind of what we're talking about. People allowing their dogs to do things on walks and things that put other dogs and dog owners in a bad situation. So that's why, like, I have been on walks where the dogs have gotten out of the gate and come and charged my dogs. I had sadly one of our clients, a pit, and it doesn't matter the breed. It was a bully breed, but it doesn't matter. It could happen with any. The dog got out of its yard and went after her dog. Her dog was a poodle, and he did kill her. Right. The dog died from its injuries from that interaction. So, and that's the problem. That's why we do the Facebook Live, Matt, to be able to educate people on putting that discipline and working on, teaching the dogs what's okay and what's not okay. So you have less chance of these terrible things happening on when you're out for a walk. Because I think I do agree. Dogs need to go for walks and need the mental exercise as well as for the humans, right? It's good for us too to go out and do and walk and all that. But like in my case, in my neighborhood, if there's there's too many loose dogs, and so if they and not always, but people will allow their dogs off the leash when they see your dogs and all that stuff, and then you can't walk multiple. Like I have a big shepherd and a lab, and if there's a problem out there, I could really get hurt there too, which is the other thought. So, and it's not, again, not that we don't walk it, but like if we have a good situation where we can take them for a nice walk in a place, we will. But it's got to be a pretty unique setup to be able to do that. So, yeah, no, I would agree. Walking isn't bad. It's just dangerous, is really what it is. And we've had enough. We've had so many. Like I said, one of our clients, and she's still heartbroken about the dog, and that happened a few years ago. And again, and the attack wasn't a big attack, but the size differential was just too much, and the little poodle was old too. On top of it, so she didn't survive that situation. And another time, another one of our clients a dog came up, ran past her, and ripped a piece of the side of the dog off. So yeah, there's stories after stories about that, and it's like that's why it's like people need to train their dogs, teach them how to walk on a leash, and be respectful of other people. If we can start really going that direction, it would be so helpful, because then then all of us can take our dogs for a walk. Because in Europe, walking dogs being out and about with each other is not a problem. The
Mhm.
dogs aren't going up to each other and socializing and all that. They're not doing that. They're just minding their own business like people. They're just walking around doing their thing. They're with their owner and they do what they do. But here, people think, well, is your dog friendly? No. And
Yeah.
maybe it is, but maybe in that moment you don't have time, and your dog doesn't have to go visit your dog. So that's where the real problem is. Not bad dog walking a dog.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the people who are letting their dogs wander off leash who have no control are not watching these Facebook lives. So,
That's correct.
so yeah. Um, so I think let's see, was it Amy, I found walking the permitted of a park ride on a weekend is a safe park
Yeah.
and ride lot. Oh, okay,
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
For
And,
safety.
and that's why a lot of people are using those sniff spots too, to be able to take their dogs. They can run, they can exercise in a uh, safe location. So that's starting to be a um, pretty popular thing now. People are doing it more and more, especially the people in the city, because I have so many people in the city that are clients of mine that that's the biggest complaint, right?
Yep. So I think Lisa, did you say you had some
Yeah, I
examples?
do. I can definitely share stuff with that. So I will go ahead and present.
Yeah. So while she's pulling that up, we wanted to show you some kind of examples about what we're talking about here and kind of how to fix it, right? We could say don't do that all day long, and then we wanted to just give you some feedback on what you can do instead.
Right.
Oops, sorry, wrong. All right, so we have attention and focus around other dogs, and this is a young pup who is working on outside of the fence. So this is my house, and I have different dogs out running around. And what we're doing is working on the dogs paying attention as well as.
Lisa, can you make that bigger?
Yeah,
Oh,
can
I'm
you make
sorry.
it bigger? On the bottom there. Yeah, there you
Yep.
Thank
go.
you.
There you go. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Whoop.
What happened?
That's okay.
There.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
So this is a young pup that we're working on. He likes other dogs. He is a Rottie, so he's a little. He can be a little quote unquote guarded with with people. So what we did was worked on the dogs staying engaged with the handler here while they worked on at a distance this situation, right? And then you would start to close space to try to get the dogs a little closer to that situation. And being on leash versus off leash is a big deal. He's got to learn to tolerate the restriction, right? Although he's done pretty good about handling that aspect of it. Sorry, guys. Let me just look at some other videos. Let me stop the share for a second. So we have different ones. Here's a closer proximity. And here's a dog that absolutely loves other dogs and will pull to the point where she will try to pull the leash out of the hands of the owner.
Oh my
to go
God.
see other people and dogs. So we have, this is Rogue and Nellie.
All right, so here we have Rogue.
So we're in a room here, and Rogue likes other dogs. He can be a little, and he knows this one who's coming in. So we're working on the other pup coming in. And you could tell he's distracted, but he's able to split attention. His mouth is not too bad. If you see, he's not super grabby, but he's having a hard time splitting. And this was probably a little closer than I would like. But for the sake of working to see where the dogs were and handling this. And so who's coming in is Nellie. Nellie is a young girl. She's loves other dogs, and she will pull out of hands to go to see other dogs. So mom has some equipment for her, but even then, the strength in the hands is a problem, right? So she's coming to us. We're working on trying to control curb her enthusiasm around other dogs. So she will get her in. Let me move forward a bit to getting in. But you see how long it took for me to work this guy where he's a little more attentive. He's aware, see his ear set. He's still aware of the other dog coming in, but there's a little head flick. He's like, oh my gosh, here she is. And she comes in, hi, my friend. And so things we would do here would be to tighten up that leash, like not allow too much here, and then work on splitting attention. I know. She's like, hey, what's up, bud? So this was tricky. This was a tricky one for her. And she's like a beagle mix. So, they're not the most, like herding breeds are a little more dialed in as a rule of thumb, I should say, and depending on the breed. But the beagles are a little more independent minded. So it took a lot to work on splitting that attention. And eventually you want to work on proximity. And this was pretty close considering.
Yeah, that is very close. That's why I'm like, wow.
Yeah. And then she cuts out and she's like, oh, hi, but hold on. I'm back to talking to this person. I think today was a day she didn't eat breakfast, which is always very helpful. Right. So. And if you notice, like on the Belgian Malinois leash, his leash is looser. So is hers. So she has opportunity, but we restrict the leash, right? I thought, oh, maybe we could get closer. Nope, too much, too soon, not ready. So step back, restrict. Then when she let it go, he came back to me and said, okay, I don't have to talk to her. Are you sure you don't want to talk yet?
Right.
I thought we were having a discussion. So, but they love playing these two. So to me, like, even though we're friends doesn't mean you get to run up on each other. Right. So,
well, because it's different when they get to run up on each other on a friend, and then somebody else that isn't a friend, they think they can do it that everybody likes that. It's like, no, some people really find that, some dogs find that very, very offensive. They don't like it.
Right.
Yeah. So. And Lisa being a skilled trainer with this, I certainly wouldn't probably not use the Malinois as my first dog, right? I don't want a dog that's going to be super social. I want a dog that's going to go, ugh, okay, whatever. And just to kind of ignore the other dog.
Right. And this was a toughie. I mean, because they play really well together, these two. So, they play really well together. So he's like, it's my friend. And he can be a little goofy, but she's like, whatever, you're a weirdo. Who cares? Right. So those are some things to, when you're working on it. Now that was super close. We pushed it. We pushed it by having proximity, but I knew that they were safe dogs to be in that proximity. And I was pushing the line to see a bit, can you work through this? And Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But it gave us a scale as far as what to work with, right? And how close, depending on who the individual was.
Yeah. And Deb Plowman was asking if you'd let them play afterwards. Yeah, sometimes if they're able to control themselves and do a really big deal, yeah, then they can
Yeah.
play.
Right.
And
'Cause then they would
sometimes not,
Right.
sometimes not. Right.
Right.
right?
So that particular room is a room that we take them through to go into the yard. So it was already a very arousing
Mhm.
situation. So I knew, I was like, well, they already get crazy about going into that area. So can you, and for me, it's important. Like, I'm not a trainer that avoids like things that are difficult to work through. I'm like, no, this is a real deal. This is stuff to work on. And you could be like, oh, well, don't take them there and don't do that with them. But for me, I'm like, if that's going to be something that happens in your life, it's going to be important to actually train through it. So that's how I am. But anyway, so those were those two kids. That was a tricky one. Let me see if I have others.
So Deb Evans, you would let them play after, they've usually I like to get a really good attention or really where they're able to really be very successful, and I would then allow some playtime. But if you're doing this more than one time, I wouldn't allow playtime all the time. Sometimes they would go back into their crate for a minute and then they can play later on, right? Because if they because what happens if they get to play every time they're out together, they can think that that's what's normal, and sometimes they can't. Like, so for example, sometimes they can't because maybe one of the dogs might be healing, something's going on, so they can't always play. So you want to make sure that they're good with either. Yeah, would they be happier if the dog got to play and all that? Yes, they would. But sometimes that's not an option. But yeah, I would definitely use play if they get along and they're able to do it. Definitely use it as a reward for sure.
And I also think too, like, sorry, Joanna, I don't know if
No,
you're
go
going to.
ahead.
I also think too, like, I would like my dogs to relax a little in the presence of a friend, depending on
Yeah.
the dynamics of the group before they actually played, right? Because if they're always in that environment, they're like, oh my gosh, it's my friend. I know we're training, but I know we're going to go ahead and play soon. So you set that precursor behavior prior to the actual engagement, right? So for me, I'm like, let's not allow it. All right, that's enough. So
Right.
Yep. And I even put a verbal to it. So if it's something that my dog is very used to doing, their best friends, they play a lot, right? And you could see it, right? Oh, here's my friend. Sometimes I'm like, I know, not right now, right? And so like not right now means I know that you want that, but not right this second. You're gonna have to wait. And sometimes it means not at all right now, but that's okay. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I have another video, and this is a dog you've seen before. I've shown videos of her. She's pretty super excited. She gets over the top. She likes other dogs, but I think she can make bad choices. And then she gets over exuberant and plays super rough. So, so we were working on distance because mom and dad are, for walking and stuff like that to help her get some more exercise. They're considering possibly down the road getting another dog. So, to help kind of understand what her skill set is, we did have her play with dogs originally, but then she seemed to get a little too rough and over aroused. So it became very important that we didn't further that and make that more exciting. So here we have Miss Chloe, and where is my here? So this is Miss Chloe, and she is, let me just shut that up. I mute me. Okay. So we're doing the up and down. Sorry. So right now I'm just working on engagement. This is a pattern game that we're just working on the orientation and feeding. Patterns are super critical. They provide predictability and so forth. I like the auto check-in, but in some cases, I think there's like a little piece missing in between to help the dogs understand. So it just depends on the dog. So in this case, we're doing some pattern games with her to try to orient. This particular dog, when I first met her, hyper aware of her surroundings, very auditory, not super engaging with people, not highly sociable, but tolerant of some handling, unless you pressure too much because, whatever. So she grew up in the shelter, blah, blah, blah. So here we are working on being able to add another dog. You notice it is a pretty big distance. And
Wow.
let me go forward. A
And
dog
I'm
is
just
going to come out
guessing.
by the trees. Sorry.
I'm just guessing this dog has a history of lunging and saying, let's go right
Yes.
now. Hence the foot on the leash.
See the head snap on. Yeah, she's like, oh, there's a dog.
Okay.
And see the head snap on her super fast. So it's hard for her. So not terrible. Like she's able to split attention, but that's how she handles stuff. Now, what's crazy is when the dogs are crated and see that quick jump, like you could tell she's super vigilant and
She's like,
aroused.
"Oh."
Oh, yeah. When can I say hi? Right. And this one would look horrible on a leash going to another dog. It's okay. It's friendly if I had my leash, right? And if you notice, I also step on the leash so that I'm not adding to tension. And plus tension, I think from the ground is different from if I were holding the leash up. So anyway, we're just working on that. And this is another pup over here, another excited teenager who is, not super engaged with other dogs, but she gets overexcited with people. So anyway, in the background, that's Madison, our poodle girl. So, but this was all she could handle because her motions, I was waiting for her motions to smooth out, right? I can't close space on this. And my reinforcement rate is heavy and high just because, and I'll start to slow down a little bit to see what she looks like. And I'm like, can you come a little forward? She's doing all right. She's not super quick.
And Lisa, this makes a good point, right? As you're doing all the training, you do have to test it. And
Yeah.
we were having a conversation about that last night about dogs that you need to train it. You put all this time in, and then you got to allow them to make a decision on it, right? It's a good idea. They're going to do it. And ideally in a perfect world, they would be 100% great and they would be perfect. But sometimes they're not. They still need more training, or they can't go past a certain point. So you have to go back to the drawing board. It's just information.
So, and if you notice with her, if the movement actually increases and she see that leash biting, that's her MO. Like when she gets excited and stimulated, that's really hard for her. So, we've been doing some work with her, and my goal is too with her leash is loose. I mean, I'm super proud of how close she's been able to do this because this is really a challenge for her.
Yeah. And I mean, just watching this as a reminder, because this is where, when you talk about professional trainers versus working on this at home, right? The working on this at home, we do one step closer, one step closer, one step closer, one step closer, and then the dog loses its mind, right? And so you may even have that working on it. Lisa may have that because she is moving closer, right? But the thing is, if you watch, it's not one step cookie and move, one step cookie and move. She's asking the dog every time, like, how long does it take you to check back in with me? Are you still able to do it if we're here? What about if we're here? And you can see with that movement, right? This dog is getting more aroused. She's able to settle in once you stop moving. Mm-hmm. But I'm guessing probably that next parking line up there, she wouldn't be able to settle anymore.
Yeah, we didn't make that far. Right? You could tell now. Do you see how her body language, she's checking out more than I like right now? Because she's like, that was a lot. So I need a minute to collect my brain. And so as a rule of thumb, what we typically see is that they keep pushing, right? Now's the time for a break. And then I'm going to try to take her and move her off to decompress. So I try to move her off to do like some sniffing so she can decompress. She's like, oh my gosh, thank God. And so we did some decompression, and then she's like, okay. And that was better.
Yeah.
So was that good enough?
Yeah.
Yes, that was great.
Sorry. Well, but and she's tricky, and you see a lot of that, right? The overexcitement, the overexuberance to want to say hi.
Yep. So to the Deb that was both Debs actually that were asking before, right? Would you let the dog go and play there? That's a situation? No.
Not those two dogs. That's
right. Just because that dog can barely maintain from 15 feet away. So until I can get you somewhat closer, right, and be able to hold it together, because that dog would have just run off and probably jumped on the poodle, right?
Right. Yeah, she would have. And Madison would have been like, no, this is
Yeah.
not okay.
Right. And I think that's what happened. It's like, oh, she's just so excited. And you hear that. If you ever say, oh, he's just so excited, that's permissive. That's not positive training, right?
Mhm.
He's just so excited. It's a lot of the permissive stuff is there's a lot of excuses, but he just loves this. But he just, I just love a lot. I love cake, but if I have a lot of it, it's really bad for me.
Right.
But I just do love it. But unfortunately, it's just not something that it's okay to do on a regular basis, right? Just and that's kind of how you want to think about it. If you're constantly saying, "Oh, he just like loves people. He just loves he just can't stand, he just wants to jump up on you and he just, and my dog yesterday, she like certain things are non-negotiables. So she got out of my office. I called her. She first wanted to go see Melanie, which she loves, but I don't care. I know you love her, but you've got to come back to me when I call you.
Yep.
So where people would have been like, oh no, she just loves her so much. I don't know. I'm sure you do, and I'm glad that you do, but you cannot not come to me when I call you, right? So there was a consequence for that behavior because it's like you must come when I call, right? So, and again, but he just loves Melanie. I'm glad she does, but you can't do that. Can't not come when so that's what I mean about positive permissive, right? Because I could have just said, well, oh, but she just loves Melanie so much, she just can't help it. I don't care, you got to come here.
My 80-pound Doberman loves to jump on people.
Yes, he does.
No one likes that, I promise.
No.
He would love
No,
to jump and put his hands right on your shoulders, and I don't want anyone to die. So
oh,
stop
Deb, the consequence for her, I went and physically brought her back to where she belonged,
Right.
right?
So it's parenting from the couch, right? It can't happen. You got to get
Yeah.
up and do something about it, right? The
Yeah.
kid's running with a marker or running along the wall, and you're like, stop doing that. And you have to actually go get the marker and take it out of the hand.
Yep.
And I think that's,
Yeah.
Sorry.
In her case, I did go get her and I grabbed her by the collar, which is something I don't do a lot. So I don't have to, for that particular dog, my consequences don't have to be major, right? She knew this was a bad thing. I went to get her. I bought her back in there and I put her in a crate in the office, which she's usually loose. But that was a consequence. I put her in a crate for a second and then I give her and then this is where you at a later point you have to give the dog the opportunity to be right. So the next time she got out, I called her, she came right back.
Right.
The dog, and then you give her permission to go see Melanie.
Right.
That's how it goes. Right? You just can't just do it because you felt like it.
Yeah. And Lisa asked what would be a good correction in that case. So just so we're clear for everybody here, right? Corrections and consequences does not mean we're not still using positive training techniques. And corrections do not have to mean I yank the dog off her feet or I hit her or anything like that, right? That's not what we're talking about. It's simply, if you can't listen, I'm going to help you,
Right.
right? And you're not going to get to do that thing that you really wanted to do. Why don't you go think about it for a minute, right? And then we'll try it again. Exactly what Nancy said, right? Or Lisa with the marker, right? Yeah, that might be a little harsher correction, but right, I'm going to get off and don't color on my walls. Go sit in the corner for a minute,
So, and I think that brings up a good thing, right? So like when we talk about training, there's also management. You're either training or managing behavior, period, across the board. So management for a dog who doesn't come when called, well, they get to wear a line. And then I also hear, well, if they wear a leash or whatever, they'll chew it up. Then get something that doesn't matter. Go to the whatever hardware store and get a spool of cheap whatever, right? And attach it and then replace it as needed. But there has to be a consequence that is relative to the individual dog.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between a correction and a consequence, I think. Like for me, a correction would be I actually have to get up and be like, totally not cool. Don't do that. And it could be even space taking, right? If I step up towards a dog and take space, the dog's like, okay, sorry, man, didn't mean to do that. And then I release the pressure. But you know, on occasion, like I know when I had Ivy and she got super excited about, like when I was working with her, feeding and handling and stuff like that, she got so jazzed up and she bit me in the back. I grabbed her by her head and I'm like, absolutely not okay. Don't do that. And then I put her away and she's like, oh. So now though she knows, she's like, oh, that doesn't look like you're happy. You know, like that's not okay. Cause I'll warn her, like, don't do that. And she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure, don't. So the consequence and the correction depends on the individual dog, I think, right? Because my one dog, like Lucas, I could go, and he's like, what? Are you having a breathing problem? And I'm going to go do this anyway, right? And so I'd have to go get him to stop him. Whereas I do that to Ivy and she's like, oh, is that bad? Yeah, don't do that. So I think there's a fine line with that too. But right. I'm not, anytime before I ever issue any sort of correction or consequence, I'm asking myself, how well does this dog know this behavior?
Right.
And that's the first thing to dictate where I go to next. So.
Right. Well, just like my little puppy tonight, just before we went on, he was like so excited. He was like, oh, teeth. And he was starting to get mouthy with me. And I'm like, no. But he is still learning that. And I'm like, no. I was very gentle. I'm like, no, you don't do that. He goes, okay. And I told him no. And I gave him something he could chew. And he goes, okay. And he's very
agreeable.
Very agreeable. So he was like, okay. He didn't take, so it didn't take any more than that. And that is the tone. He went to nip me and I'm like, no. And I gave him a toy. He goes, there you go. You can have that toy. That's a good boy. That's it for that dog. Because he doesn't, like Lisa said, he doesn't know that that's not okay. And he immediately stopped doing it when I told him no. And I gave him something else to do. And he goes, okay, I'll do that then, which is great. But some dogs, maybe if he's a little bit more, no, I really want to do that. Then I'm like, oh, okay. Then the consequence would have to be a little bit more severe, right? But he didn't need it today in this moment in time. That's not to say that in another month that might change, but for right now that was good enough for him. He goes, all right. And it was he understood that was not what I wanted. He was happy with what he got to do, and that was the end of it. So that's what I mean. Consequences have to fit the situation and the dog in that moment. So, and management fails. Like if you have two dogs that don't get along, managing that. I'll give you a perfect example. If the dog doesn't like to come and you have to chase it around the yard. So let's say you just put a line on the dog and you just walk down the line to the dog, but you never really work on the recall, right? If that string fails or breaks or whatever, it's going to fit. That's because you're managing it. You're not training it, right? So it's a big difference because I put a gate up to block the door when I answer the door. See, but that's management. But yeah, sometime eventually the dogs learn that not to go over, but sometimes the management might fail. You might not latch the gate right away. The gate might fall and the dog is still going to be there, right? And it does and it's really the management with the multiple dog situation is this is the thing that fails the most. Does that make sense? When
yes, it does make sense.
Because it's a lot to manage. It's easy to forget to latch a gate. It's easy to if you're distracted, to put two dogs together that maybe shouldn't be together. That don't get along. So no matter how diligent you are about making sure those things that happen, they do. So you put up a gate to block the door when I answer the door, and that's but that could fail. That gate could fall. So what'll happen if that gate happens? Well, if your dogs have been behind that gate a long time, probably nothing. They'll be like, oh, the gate fell. We're supposed to be back here.
Well, yeah, and this is the other thing too, right? Like management's okay as long as that's what you're using, right? So like if worst case scenario is my dog got around the gate and jumped on my friend, right? Okay, that was not ideal. We didn't like that. But if grandma comes over and she's 92 and she's got a bad hip, and the Doberman, gets and pushes her out the door and she breaks her hip, that's a pretty significant consequence. So that's something, right, I might take more time to train because it has more serious consequences than don't jump on people when they come in the door. You know what I mean? So management's okay as long as you understand at some point whatever you're using is gonna have an oops. What's the value of the other thing that happens? If it's really high, I might spend more time trying to train versus manage.
Right. And Deb, my dog knows not to charge the door, but I think every time I hope this isn't a fail time. Yeah, but that thing is, you're also doing some. If you're actually training it, you shouldn't have to, fails, right?
You
'Cause
should test
Yeah, see what happens, because it's
see what happens.
because you've already been training it, so you should be all right. Kim, yeah, and that's why I said for now that my puppy was very good with, and I've had dogs that don't want to stop biting. So and a lot of times, if it gets to where they're just frantic about biting, usually they need a nap. So, in my experience, means they need a nap. So usually I put them in a crate, they fuss, and then they go right to bed because they're overtired. So that's why he was not overtired. So I knew that. That's why he was like, "Oh, okay, I'll just chew this." But I had one of my beagles, my first beagle, when she would be overtired, she was hell. She would be bitey, grabby, tugging, and I always knew when that happened. I'm like, "Okie dokie, somebody needs a nap." So I put her in the crate, and off she went. Off she went to sleep. So yeah, and when they're young like that, that happens over time. Like my puppy today was not tired. He was just like, he was just a little excited, and I'm like, no, don't. But he's again very agreeable. My beagle wasn't as agreeable as he is, so she needed a little more force. And almost every time when you couldn't give her a substitute or you couldn't give her something else, usually almost 90% of the time she needed to take a nap.
Along this lines, I just wanted to bring up, because I saw this, I got an email about it, which is very interesting. The IAABC is actually looking at, I don't know if you guys saw this, they're looking at trying to put a forum together about, yeah, you saw this, Joanne?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and then did you, a forum between the positive trainers and then trainers that use other methodologies. So to have a real conversation, because I think that's really missing. Like, I mean, I'm not,
Agreed.
I think it depends. And this is where it becomes, the far extreme, the extreme right, the extreme left, blah, 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 whatever. And that life happens in between, right? So I thought that was really cool and interesting. And I don't know if you guys caught the podcast with Ivan Balabanov and Michael Shikashio.
Oh yeah, that was a big yes.
Yeah, so it was very interesting, but it's basically a variety of methodologies, like different ways of training and so forth, and what our preference is and so forth. I personally prefer more positive, as we do, like all. Now, that doesn't mean I'm purely positive. If you've asked me, have I corrected a dog and grabbed him by the collar and said, "Have you lost your mind?" Absolutely, I have.
Yep.
But it's not a go-to for me. And then there's other equipment as well. So I think along the lines is that, you don't want to go, life is not about extremes, right? It's about finding that happy medium in between and making it a pleasant and happy thing. Because I think if you either go from abuse on one end or abuse on the other end, if you go to extremes. And to me, that's not, it's not a healthy thing. So I always try to look for that in between. But I thought that was really interesting that the industry is kind of looking at that piece. And I don't know if anybody received that. There was what was it? Like a monkey, survey monkey or whatever, about, how you felt about different training and stuff through the CPDT group. Has anybody received that? Mm-hmm. So that was interesting as well, because they're asking about different methodologies because of, what's happening in the industry. So I thought it was fascinating. I mean, I think it's a good way to open up, because I find a lot of trainers are very judgy about each other. And, in this industry, I think it's really important to try and find some happy mediums, because even though I don't agree, I do believe in various tools that potentially can work depending on the dynamics of the couple or the pair involved. So
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I think, and and I know I'm probably gonna get hate mail for this, but and it seems like the positive trainers are the worst, which is the irony is can choke the horse.
Yeah.
The positive trainers can be the worst judgy about different, you know.
Oh,
things.
judgy, yes. I was gonna say, you know what? Some of the purely positive stuff is like you learn how to reward, but your timing sucks. And
right.
you don't know what happens when your reward system goes wrong and the dog's learning something different, right?
Right.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's more, I think it's a lot more, and then too, you're talking about like training techniques versus understanding the behavior and how to affect it.
Right.
It's so crazy, right? Because, and it's just very fascinating to me. I'm like, it's okay, I can clicker train, but it doesn't mean I understand behavior or
That's
how
right.
to affect that change
right.
over, because in my opinion, I personally believe as a trainer, if you cannot read behavior, you shouldn't be training a dog. That's me, and that's my judgy side. But that's as far as it gets, right? I mean, as far as like, I would really prefer to see a lot more people be able to adjust their training based upon the individual in front of them. And I think that's important. So
Yeah. No,
I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah. No, and
It's
it's
another Facebook Live.
yeah. Well, yeah, right. So one of the things is one of the things we wanted to kind of leave you with is the truth is being positive is good for the dogs. Being too permissive isn't. So you always want to, when you are interacting or you're seeing these behaviors and you're thinking about what to do about it, you really want to think, does the dog really understand? And are you excusing it away? Because I think that's that's kind of how you'll know if you're being too permissive. You're going to say, well, he just loves blah, 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 or he just likes this, or he doesn't like that, so he can't do that. So it's something to consider as you're living and training your dog.
Well, and I'll throw this part onto you. Now that you've heard this, if somebody else really truly is trying to work it, and you are that person, you're like, I love you, right? Don't do that. If somebody's really trying to get their dog to stop running at you, and they do, and they pull away and they get to you, don't pet them, don't say hello.
Yeah.
Let them come and work it out, right? Be helpful.
Right.
Yes, please. That would be wonderful as well.
Well, yeah, especially when you're seeing somebody struggle or trying to do the right thing, right? It's really important.
Yep.
Anyway, I hope this was helpful. And I know there's a lot more information about how to, depending on what you're asking the dog, to give the dog permission to do those things. And if you like more information on how to do that and how to greet and stuff like that, we'd be happy to do another live on it. But this is, just something I just want you to ponder. Permissive versus positive. Very, very important. All right. Have a great night. See you all next
Thanks,
week.
everybody.
Bye.